yes, so this was the meme I wanted to show. Basically, am I nervous? Yes, I'm kind of nervous because it's a forum where a lot of senior people are there. So if there is anything goes wrong, please bear with me. I made sure that since it's a data protection forum, every meme gets its credit, and I have given the credit with the links as well. So what I will be doing again, I'm showing that 40 minutes discussion, 20 minutes Q&A. But if there is anything that you want to add or you want to ask, feel free to put it in the chat box. I think the chat box I should be able to see and answer if there are any questions. Then at the end, there is a 20 minutes dedicated Q&A. What I will be doing is I would be sharing with you 4 highly interesting case studies that I found with application of AI in cybersecurity, and which had some data privacy or protection significance, basically. So without going into detail, let's deep dive. So this is a typical AI landscape. So what happened was we started with statistics. So AI has been the word has been coined, and before also. So in 1940s the movement started. Then we had some kind of an AI winter in the 80s, and then around 2006 2007 it started to pick up again. So it started with statistics basically. Then with statistics, when we went into algorithms, that found machine learning. And when we applied something called as neural networks to that machine learning thing, we went into artificial intelligence. So this is how, in a very brief or a broad scale view, how the AI landscape looks like. Having said that, we can divide this into what you say 3 subsets or 3 buckets basically. So we say that there are 3 buckets. So one is machine learning, where we have we say it's a combination of statistics, mathematical equations plus algorithms. Then there are expert systems. So the difference between them and the machine learning is basically expert systems are rule-based systems, and they are built to solve very particular or specific problems. So they are not something which are generic, or if let's say there is some piece of code that we have written, it will not be generic to solve other problems. And then the third revolutionary thing that has come up, is the deep learning, where it is basically machine learning which is driven by neural networks. So what are the factors, why the AI age has come, or why artificial intelligence is a hot word which has picked up in last 10 years. So one of the factors has been data, because we had internet explosion. We had lot of data which got created. So for training any artificial intelligence model or training any neural networks, we require lot of data. So data got generated. Second thing was we require computing power to train the neural networks or train these algorithms basically. So we had this GPU revolution, where Nvidia and all other companies, they came up with these GPUs which were used for running these training models, for training the neural networks over the data which got generated, and it kind of gave that high performance computing flavor to it. So we were able to train the neural networks. And the third thing is an explosion of people related in this research, where the academia picked that up and helping the industry to build systems which can help them make decisions out of the data. basically. So these were the three major factors which kind of are driving the development of AI. And another fourth thing which I see is the human life thing. Something like pictures that we take. So we put it on Instagram, we put it on Facebook, or the voice interactions that we have with our mobile phones, or the emails that we are saying. So a lot of these systems that we use in day-to-day life, they are getting affected by these neural networks, basically. Yes, what you say is right. So decision systems is, we can say, another category, basically. Yeah. So now going forward, just a second. So what we will be doing is I would be taking four case studies. So the first one is endpoint protection. So what is endpoint protection is like, so typically we all work in the corporate environments and we have corporate networks. So when we say endpoint is basically any laptop, any mobile phone, or any desktop computer that has been used. So let us see what we mean by endpoint protection and the Wazoo use case. So what is happening now these days is that we want to protect basically the endpoints from getting affected from things like malware or things like viruses, or we don't want the data leakages to happen on these endpoints via some adversary. So what people are doing here is they are making use of agent-driven data collection, the software. So one of the popular ones is Wazoo. So this is something which is very popular. So it is a fork of a very famous project, open source project called as OSSec. And what it gives in endpoint protection is basically it provides security analytics dashboards, basically. So you can see that. Then there is intrusion detection that happens. Then you can do log data analysis, file integrity monitoring, vulnerability detection, the configuration assessment, and some of the important things like regulatory compliance. So it gives PCI DSS regulatory compliance, or the GDPR regulatory compliances. Then there is cloud security and container security. So what happens is so how does the architecture work, or this thing works, right? So what happens is this is a typical architecture of it. So we have endpoints, or where it can be a server, desktop, laptop, cloud instance, virtual machine. So you install a Wazoo agent basically on these endpoints. You can also automate the installations of these Wazoo agents. Then it collects the cluster, Wazoo cluster. It collects all the data which is coming from these agents, and there are a lot of rules which the Wazoo cluster identifies the data with, and it kind of gives you the outputs on the dashboard. So what happens is that if there is there are PCI DSS rules from the data protection perspective, or if there are GDPR compliance rules, and if there is something which happens on this desktop via an adversary, that it has violated some rule of PCI DSS, or it has violated some rule of GDPR, then you will see the alert getting generated on the dashboard. So you would know what action needs to be taken to resolve something on the desktop or laptop. Now this is a typical example of an endpoint protection system. Now, where the AI comes into picture is that if you have thousands of servers and thousands of desktop and laptops, then you would have a lot of data that would get collected into this Wazoo cluster, and there would be some alerts which would not be that important to you, some alerts which would have let's say a medium category of severity, and some would be high level or severe alerts. So this is just one use case. So what would happen is that the data that gets generated out of these agents, we can train the AI on identifying and classifying the severity breaches, and accordingly building a smart alert system which would tell us from the data protection point of view, or from the vulnerability point of view, or from the security analytics point of view, what would be important to us, or what would be the critical alerts. So we can use natural language processing basically. So this is all text data that is going to get generated. So we would have natural language understanding AI, which could understand the data that gets generated, and accordingly it would create smart reports. It can create smart reports for us, which we can consume for either our compliance. I'm stressing on compliance because that is part of data protection we are talking about. We can do smart vulnerability analysis, that okay, it can classify, basically it still classifies that okay, this is a critical vulnerability which needs to be taken care of, like for the log4j1 or the other ones. And there is one more AI system that can be built into this agent, which is in some form of primitive stage in this Wazoo, is active response. So we can have we can train the basically the AI to react to certain attacks. So for example, if there is a password guessing attack which is going on, again from the data protection point of view, then we can train that active system to respond by, let's say, locking after certain password failure attempts, or getting shut down, or something like that. So this is one use case in this endpoint protection. The other second use case is this is the research paper which I collaborated with Dr. Gopal Sakarkar, who is from professor from Raisoni College, and Dr. Kolekar, who is from IIT Patna. So this got published with students Gaurav Patil, Pratik Datta, Ruchi Chaturvedi, and Shivam Kumar. So what we did here is a very interesting thing, that a lot of network packets, they get generated in the network, computer network that we have. So what we did was we took a classic case of DNS tunneling attack, and what we did was we trained a deep learning algorithm. So we to identify the normal packets versus the DNS tunneling attack packets, network packets in the network. So basically, we trained the AI to identify normal network packets versus those network packets which we could see they were used for doing the DNS tunneling command control attack thing. So this is also going to be what you say, some of these applications are there out in the field, and some of them are being built where people are training artificial intelligence to identify different what you say attacks which can be either state-of-art attacks, or which happens on the networks, to identify that okay, some attack is being in process, and then alert the system administrator. Yes, so there are certain questions that are being asked. So is there any upper limit to the number of endpoint nodes it can track? No, there is no upper limit. The best part is Wazoo is open source. So if you have understanding of some technology, you will be able to deploy that in your organization free of cost. So the only cost that you will have to bear is the number of hours you put in. Plus, if you chose to install the Wazoo server on the cloud, then that whatever cloud thing you will have. Then is there AI used in DLP email security? Yeah. So in email security, what people are using AI for is a classic use case is identifying what you say the spam emails. So Google has used it for identifying spam emails versus the non-spam emails, or a spam classifier. That is a classic use case. Another use case is detecting phishing emails basically. So okay, so one link has been shared. Can one segregate the endpoint devices into personal sections, office sections? Yes. So this can be done. So what you can do is you can have default, you can have groups in that Wazoo which you can configure for personal sections or office sections, and then you can tag those devices accordingly and do the segregation. Yes, so Splunk is also, so what happens is you can connect Wazoo to Splunk as well. So Splunk is basically the streams, you can consume the streams coming from different thing, or you can use the Splunk. But there is a way to connect Wazoo to Splunk as well if you want to connect. Yes. So this was the first one. Let's go to the second one. So this is another classic use case where malware classification can be done by building a image classification system. So this was so we saw an example of this one which I talked about. So here we built basically a text classifier which could classify the text or the bytes in the packets as either DNS tunneling attack packet versus the normal one. Now I'm talking about the image classification technique. So how do you do malware classification by building image classifiers? So now what happens is so every file you see on your computer, so this is an example of a file here which I am quoting from this one of the article written by this Hugo Mallet. So he's a data analyst here. So so this is a classic example. So if you open any file into binary, basically what you have in the binary file is 10 numbers. Now if you convert that binary file into, let's say, an image, but then you will get something like this. So you will get what you say the binary byte getting converted into the image. How does that happen? Is like every 8-bit that you read in 1 zeros, you convert them into a pixel which has a number between 0 to 255. So when you do this conversion of that binary numbers into the actual pixels, you get certain image. Now, when the scientists observed that so the data set that they took there was they had family or class of what you say malwares as one thing, and there was a type which was associated to it. So what happened was when they did convert the malware affected files into images versus the normal files which were there into images, they understood that the malware files, they had what you say a typical pattern which got converted into the when they got converted into the images. So what happens? They trained an image classifier to identify these images, malware images of the files which got converted versus the normal images of the files which were not affected by the malware. So that's how they trained the AI for identifying which files had malware and which files basically didn't have malware. So the algorithm was that you take a file and you do a binary conversion, or you read it in binary, you convert it into convert the file into an image, and then you give it input to the AI, that image, and the AI will tell you, since we have built an image classifier, the AI will tell you whether that image was classified as a malware with a type, or it's a image of a normal file, basically. So that's how the image classification technique was used to build what you say a malware classification engine. So yes. Wazoo versus Splunk is a different debate altogether, basically, but there is a Wazoo connector which you can use to connect to Splunk, and then you can do the analysis. Yes, so okay, so you want me to share the link, so let me put it into the chat so everyone can look at the link. Yeah, sure. So next use case, we will go into. So this is fully automated penetration testing. So this is also a very interesting use case. So what happens with penetration testing is you want it to be done at a regular timing. And there are many things you can do with penetration testing is like web application penetration testing that happens. Then there is network penetration testing that you must be knowing. Then there are, you want the static or dynamic analysis of your code, which needs to be done and vulnerabilities needs to be found. So one use case is, how you do, and so in penetration testing, what happens is that you kind of use different kind of softwares to do the penetration testing, and then you come up ultimately with a report of how does the thing work. Okay. So how does the thing work? So here, if we take example of that, just a second. I want to talk about deep exploit. Just give me a second. Just a second. I want to go to. Yes, so this is something very interesting where it is called as deep exploit. So what it does is it does the fully automated penetration testing. And how does it do is what we give.
Ketan, please share screen.
Yeah, sorry. I think I lost the screen share. Yes. So this is one of the applications that we have where we kind of train the neural networks on the data like OS type, product name, version name. I will request the other participants to mute. So yes, so basically we have this OS type that we can give input to for the training, the product name, the version, the exploit module, and the target. And what the neural network gives output are the payloads which can be used, basically to attack the servers. That's how it works. So this is the famous software Metasploit, which is basically used for the executions, and the payloads that you see on the screen are the ones, are the Metasploit basically related payloads or Metasploit related scripts, which are fired automatically. And ultimately, it creates it creates a report. So if you see how does this work, it works fully automatic. There is no human intelligence or no human intervention in it. So one thing is it does the intelligence gathering, then it does the exploitation, and once the exploit scripts are run, they kind of generate the text data, and that what happens on the post exploitation thing, and it automatically generates a report. So this works. What you say? This will work on any test server where we want to use the Metasploit for testing things. So what is used inside this is something very interesting called as reinforcement learning. So what happens in reinforcement learning is that, if you want to explain it in very simple words, is that there is an agent, we can say that there is an agent, and it kind of goes into action, and it takes actions as per the interpretation it has of the environment. and it acts through and learns through trial and error. So let's say if we are training it for that penetration testing one, it would take certain actions, it would learn from those actions, and via that error correction thing, or via that trial and error basis, it would take care of things. So why I'm emphasizing on these 3 points is because all our data, organizational data, it resides. So from the endpoint protection thing, all our organization data today at Converge AI, it resides on our endpoints or either in the cloud, which is given by our clients. So endpoint protection is of importance to us because that is the data we are protecting. And that's why the AI is helping us to protect, when I say data protection, from our standpoint, it is our either our client data or our internal organization data, which we are trying to protect by making use of AI, by using these endpoint and detection systems. This malware classification thing is also related to data protection, because if you take an example of ransomware or malware which hits a network or organization like us, then it will have catastrophic effects on the data loss that will have, because our systems would get locked by that ransomware or malware. Then this penetration testing is also connected to the data protection for us, because for us, again, the data is basically the training data or the testing data that is of prime importance to us at Converge.ai. Which we use. So wherever that data is residing, either on cloud or on the local computers, we want to ensure that there is a fully automated penetration testing system which runs and it's checking for the protection of systems, so that ultimately we are protecting the data. Then this is also a very interesting use case, PassGap. So this is a deep learning approach for password guessing. So this is also of importance to us from the data protection perspective, because a lot of systems that we use via the cloud or via the storage systems, there we have passwords, storage systems, or mostly they are driven by passwords, or these days we have other systems, OTP based systems for doing the security or biometric systems. But mostly like our email system with or without two-factor authentication, it is run with a two-factor authentication, but it is still mostly a password driven. Email systems or social networks or other things from the personal perspective are run by passwords. So this is another interesting thing where the researchers, what they did was they had databases available on the internet of already hacked passwords. So what they did was they used those databases which were already hacked, and they trained the generate. So GAN stands for generative adversarial network models, and they trained the AI on basically the passwords that were available to them, and then they asked the AI to generate passwords for guessing purposes. And this was a very interesting experiment that they did, and ultimately when they tested, they were able to find that 51 to 73% more passwords were guessed than one of the popular output of the hashcat tool. Basically, so this is from the attacker's perspective. This is a very interesting case study where there are password-based systems and someone is trying to basically outguess for the passwords. So the popular tools that currently are there was Hashcat and John the Ripper, as you must be knowing. So there is a question. Yes. So it's AI part of deep exploit, or one need to install an AI engine. So deep exploit, if you see the architecture, let me go back to the deep exploit architecture. So as you see from this diagram, these are the system components basically. So this reinforcement learning model is part of basically it's an independent component, but this is part of this deep exploit thing. So when you will clone the repository and you will go through this, the trained data is available, and in deep exploit code you will find it, find the code basically for that. So AI is part of this deep exploit thing. So this whole thing is deep exploit. There are two components to it. One is the Metasploit tool, which has all the exploits for the payloads, which is a very popular tool you must be knowing for penetration testing. And this is the AI component of that deep exploit, which which uses the very popular what you say TensorFlow, which is written in that Keras or TensorFlow framework using those things, which has a reinforcement AI learning model. And this kind of interacts with this Metasploit, and this whole thing is part of the deep exploit. Yeah. Then the last and the most disruptive thing is the deep fakes, as you all must be knowing, which what you say for me are the ones which are going to cause disruptions in data protection or data identification, or identifying that okay, which one is the fake one and which one is the original one. And this is going to disrupt a lot of the things. So what are deep fakes? So just a second, I think I lost the screen. So give me a second. Yes. Let me know if you are able to see my screen.
Yes, it's visible.
It's visible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a second. Yeah. So this is the most what you say scary use of the deep fakes from the perspective of data protection or data identification. So which data is authentic and which data is not. So this is readily available tool called as Deepface Lab, and it kind of uses AI for creating deep fakes. So here you see you can give the original what you say picture, and it would generate fake what you say fake pictures of the figures basically. And another scary use of it is that it can also imitate the voice. So let's say you want to create so I'm talking right now, so you can train the AI to generate a deep fake of mine with my own voice and with my own face, and you can make me talk what you say the statement that you want to make me talk. So this has very scary kind of use cases, and the most concerning thing according to me is that so these things are very readily available on the GitHub and these things. And for normal people it is very difficult to make out of the videos whether the videos are generated from the deep fake or whether the videos are generated originally basically. So this is something is in the future we need to train common people for identifying if they encounter a video, that whether that video was a fake video or that video was an original video. And with the advent of a lot of WhatsApp usage, if someone starts circulating a fake video, then it can cause a lot of damages to the from a society point of view. So this is something in the future we will have to train people in identifying whether similar tools are available like fake app. So we'll have to train people in identifying how they do. Yes, is it possible to show sample code execution of deepfake? I think we can have a session if you want, another session where I can show you some samples of deep fake. So the concerning thing is, then how do we stop malicious deep fakes? So this is an article I quote from the IEEE Spectrum. So currently, when this article was written, only few nations from their data privacy and protection point of view. So this was written in 2020 April. So if you see from this article, only what you say, few countries have criminalized it. So if you see, United States, of course, was the one who was leading, and they had the first federal law created. And the other countries outside the United States, only at the time in April 2020, it reported at IEEE Spectrum that only China and South Korea had taken some specific action to prohibit deepfake deception, basically. And at that time in April 2020, United Kingdom, the Law Commission was looking into reviewing existing laws, basically pertaining to other use cases of these deepfakes. So I don't know if India has the as the part of data protection and privacy thing, has the laws which prevent this use of deepfakes against someone like me as a common citizen, or some other thing. But that is something, in the future we will have to look into, if the laws are not in place for a technology like this. So I think these were the four, 5 use cases that I wanted to talk about, which I felt are interesting and related to somewhat data protection and privacy. Some from the corporate perspective, or the corporate network perspective and the applications perspective, and these PassGAN and these things from the corporate, as well as from a public perspective. Thank you very much. I think we have 10 minutes, so we can extend for if needed for the Q&A part as well. So from my part, I think this was it. Thank you very much for patiently listening, and thank you very much for asking some very good questions.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please ask to Ketan. I think Meena ma'am has one query. You can answer, Ketan.
Yes. So is deepfake similar to impersonation? You can somewhat say it is similar to impersonation, but it is so, what you say, so near to reality, the impersonation, that it sometimes for a human also it becomes difficult to understand. For common people, for the techies, it may get, for the techies, if they see maybe 100 videos, I guess they should be able to fathom the thing that, okay, this is a fake one, deep fake one, and this is an original one. But if you see in India, the WhatsApp users, which I'm concerned about, a lot of people who are non-technical who are using it, it can be difficult for them to understand which one is the original one and which one is a fake one. They do have identifiers, but it takes you some time to get used to identify the identifiers. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, we can schedule a demo of deepfake at some time if you want me to take a session on that.
Yeah, any other questions?
Ketan, one question, Subrad here. See, while I don't understand much of AI and not a techie per se, but in the balance between security and privacy, in the quest to achieve greater degrees of privacy, whether that be by way of endpoint security or whatever, in using AI to that extent, in fact, look at my earlier question also in that context. How is all this going to ensure that the red line of privacy is not being violated while deploying all of these AI tools in quest of attaining higher security levels?
Yes, so that is a very good question. So to answer, there is no specific answer to that. It all ultimately ends on what is the AI governance strategy that you want to put in place. So, for example, I guess what will happen in future, every organization will have to define organization's AI governance strategy, and under which you will have to define which data you're going to store or which data you're not going to store. So let me give you a practical use case. So in one of the endpoint security softwares, you can actually, take data on the keystrokes the user is typing. Now, as part of AI governance strategy, you can skip and not take that data into consideration of because it is affecting the privacy of the person. So you are not going to, as an AI governance strategy, take into consideration whatever the key logging that they happen either on the shell or on the what you say on the PowerShell or the command prompt. So you are not going to log the keystrokes. So from the AI governance strategy point of view, you have two decisions to make. One, are you going to capture the keystrokes? Or second is you are not going to capture this keystroke. So a lot of this privacy thing has a connection with the regulation as well as with the what kind of AI governance strategy you want to put in place. Another classic example is of emails. So that is also part of AI governance strategy, where you want to read the emails for some text analytics, or where you want to skip the emails for text analytics. So for example, if you want to understand whether phishing is going, if there is a certain email that is being received by the organization's email server, and you want to put it under scanner for checking the phishing in that email, so there can be different features which can be expected from the text data, like the text, the image, or anything. But here the privacy question comes into picture from the AI governance strategy. What features are you going to extract? And when you are analyzing any text, whether you're going to compromise the user's privacy for understanding when you are understanding the natural language which is written in the email. So a lot of
somewhere is there an assumption being made that all endpoint device owners will have some level of awareness of what is the kind of AI going to do on my device, and the level of understanding of individuals could vary from individual to individual. People, there can be situations where unsuspecting individuals might not be following certain controls or certain protocols, and in the process, inadvertently perhaps, it might be because people, the right hand not knowing what the left is doing, the designers of solutions like this might be assuming that they are the kind of safeguards that endpoint device owners should be doing, and they might go ahead with the assumption that they will be doing. But once it comes to deployment in the practical world, due to non-understanding of what assumptions that these people have made, people might leave certain sections or certain data on their endpoint devices open. And when the AI starts running, it might inadvertently intrude into certain areas and end up being provided access to information that eventually gets personal. And then it could get into legal issues like, saying that you should have done this to prevent my AI program from intruding into your privacy, and the device owner saying that you should have informed me, and those kind of issues are also cropping up.
Absolutely, Subha sir. Sameer here. You would have heard of concept called DPI, deep packet inspection, where similar confusion is happening. I'm sure Ketan will agree and will probably throw more light on this. So DPI also does deep dive and actually goes through the content, and the new firewalls which are coming are taking care of it. But coming back to your point, You would have heard of this Pegasus controversy, and
Yeah,
some of
correct,
it.
Yes, I was coming to that actually.
Yeah.
So deep packet inspection, the case study which I showcased with the paper which we published is a classic example of the deep packet inspection that you talked about. So here we trained a deep learning algorithm basically to do the deep packet inspection for DNS tunneling attack, but it can be done for certain other things. And the scandal that you talked about is a classic example where the user didn't know that some agent was installed on the phones basically. So here I want to also highlight the AI ethics part of it and the AI governance part of it again, that there is what you say from the organization's perspective, you will need to have one AI ethics or one AI governance policy in place, and you will have to define what that is in order to take care of the legalities or how transparent as an organization you want to maintain.
Okay, then follow
Yeah,
up
this is
question. 1 minute. Presently, what just now you suggested that there has to be some policy or ethical policy regarding AI. Is it currently used or implemented somewhere?
Yes, so there is a separate branch of AI ethics for that, and people have different interpretations of that. So Elon Musk has opened that open AI forum where he wants people to democratize where he has put in money to democratize the AI so that a lot of people are able to understand both the sides of the AI governance and AI ethics, and plus have access to codes. So they a lot of the open AI systems are open source. So he wants to achieve maybe by, so this is my personal interpretation, where he wants to maybe do the open source thing. So there are, so as I said, as I'm quoting, that there is a separate branch of it called as AI ethics, which you can look into and see how it is evolving to build the policies on an organizational level.
But having said that, Namit, Samir here, it is still, please understand that you are a hardcore technology person, and for you and Elon Musk to have an open platform on AI discussion and to assume that the whole world is using a AI ethics and governance scheme, that's all right. But for the majority of the users, more than 90% of the users, this is an assumption. I, as an enterprise, if I were to buy a software and I were to sign a SLA with them that you have taken care of all the AI ethics as defined by XYZ forums, and you also agree to that. Still, for me as a user, as a large enterprise, how do I know that you are not storing each and every keystroke that I'm putting on my laptop? So to be able to store, or to be able to capture all my personal data. So I think it's a very very big issue for non-technical people, which is the majority of the world, right? Non-majority of the world is non-technical. It's only 2, 3,
Yes.
5% of people who understand the subject, and that also there will be very few people who actually implement these. So from Dr. Limay's point of view and Subha sir's point of view, I agree with them that the implementation of this and the governance part of this is going to be a very very big challenge, and is going to throw the whole system into a big unknown, some kind of unknown where people don't know. They will have to believe what the software people are telling them, which
So
is
I will give you a counter to that.
yeah,
So
please.
this has been happening since ages. This is not a part of AI where someone buys a software and someone puts a backdoor into that.
Correct,
Right?
correct.
So,
Yes,
so
yes,
this
yes.
has been happening since ages. So current, if you see the history, how did we tackle it?
Hmm.
Is we had a certain auditing system that we put in place or put in check place, and we had certain what you say. So how do currently, so leave apart the AI part and leave apart the other parts. So let's say if I go to a vendor and I buy the software,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I trust the vendor that he has not put a backdoor in that, right? So the only way currently we do that is we sign. There are two methods that I know is, one is there is a legal compliance that we sign that okay, we as you making sure that you have not put a backdoor in my system, and the
Correct.
second thing is the legality. It protects me maybe via cyber insurance or via some system that tomorrow if that backdoor gets or the zero-day attack happens and the backdoor gets inserted, this is the amount of value that the cyber insurer is going to pay. So
you are saying that there is a new position opening up called AI auditor or deep
yes,
tech auditor.
So I think what will happen is we will have to come up with some standards. So currently there are no standards. So like in security, we have ISO 227. Let's take an example of ISO 27001 standard. So when we say that that organization is security compliant, then if the vendor tells us that he has a compliance, then we kind of trust the vendor a bit more because we say that, okay, a third-party auditor has audited the organization. So same thing, I think in the future may happen where we have auditors who might audit, do the audit and submit it, or we may have some kind of
great.
Okay, Ketan, when you say auditing, just to my understanding is, Samir, maybe the time of you writing the code, that quality assurance part, right? Code review and the coding guidelines would get strengthened to implement this kind of aspects, if I'm right. Because
my point was something else, Ramesh. I agree with you, but I am a user of an app called, let's say, Make My Trip, right? And how do I know Make My Trip, when they developed the app in house, whether they were following those norms which Ketan talks about in terms of AI ethics?
Absolutely.
So that's where the question is, and
no. I think you answered that as an enterprise, I don't need to. Now, if the person is committing to me, that service provider, this particular piece is, adhering to A, B, C, D, you said forum. I'm talking about like GDPR or PCI DSS. We are fine, right? Now, what we are talking, another point is that how are we really implementing it is I'm trying to really apply my mind. Ketan should say yes or no, that while developing the code, right, your coding guidelines, your training to the developers and to the code coverage, whatever static analysis or code review we are trying to do, dynamic and right unit testing, this needs to be taken care, is my understanding. Am I right, Ketan?
So that is just one part of it,
right.
If that gets followed. But when we buy from a vendor, as I answered earlier, also, I think we got it that like PCI DSS, you gave example, we may have some standard, and the vendor can say that, okay, when I made the software or as an organization, I have got this compliance from an auditor, so you can trust me. Because that is the current system, how the softwares are trusted. So Make My Trip, again, a classic example, when we do that payment thing, so we want to make sure that it is at least a PCI DSS Bolt compliant e-commerce payment gateway, basically.
Sameer sir, one more example is Facebook, where they promise that they won't sell users' data yet, Cambridge Analytica. That happened, right?
Yes, so Cambridge again, so what happens is, thank you very much, Arya sir. So Cambridge is an excellent example I see is of what you say, intelligent gathering of the data, and then you are profiling people based on that data, and there was a what you say, a closed loop system which kind of identified every person's flavor and accordingly pushed them the content, basically. So I think in any digital business, what I feel is there are three things which are of importance, that if you can know your customer, that is the first thing. So who is your customer, and do you know your customer? The second thing is what kind of distribution channel you set to get to that customer, that is of importance. And the third thing is how much money you are spending in doing the first two things. So that is going to ultimately define where you are doing the digital business correctly or not. Thank you, Deepak sir.
Yeah.
So any other
So
questions that I can answer?
Ketan, there is one question on the use of agents. Is it possible to deploy these systems or similar systems without the use of agents?
Can you throw some more context on it? Like maybe you can give one use
For
case.
example, for example, Vaju Need requires its user agents to be installed on the server on the endpoints for gathering of data. It can also be given explicit access or specific access rights to without setting up the agents inside the server or inside the hosts. So is this possible to, or is such a scenario possible?
So Vaju
Because
has,
there could be,
yeah, so in endpoint
yeah.
protection, what happens is, I will answer it in a two-part way. So what happens is in any endpoint collection, data collection system or an endpoint system, there is one agent-based system and there is an agentless based system as well. So how does that agentless based systems are? Let's say we have a PF sense in our network. So the agentless system knows in which folder the PF sense is dropping the logs. So if we give the agentless system access to those logs via some kind of a mechanism which happens in Vazu, then or from routers or switches, then there is that agentless system works. But primarily what happens is, this is, if you see from the operating system perspective, this may be counted as a security breach. Basically, when you are accessing any folder without explicit access, or how do we basically come up with a similar system? And we want some advanced, advanced capabilities from the security perspective, which need the permissions kind of. So let's say take an example of, let's say, file integrity monitoring. So when we are doing file integrity monitoring, you need certain kind of accesses on those folders to be given to those agents to do the folder watches. So in these certain use cases, it may be difficult for an agentless operation. But let's say we just want the agent to collect the logs, then we can have the agentless system.
Going by Samir sir's point, that how do they trust on the application that it is not having a backdoor or it's not transmitting data to some other server remotely. Let's say an agent is required to be set up on certain systems, and by your point, you're saying that yes, it counts as a breach. Yes, it does. So there has to be some kind of exception handling, like there should be some kind of an exceptions given to those or a privilege given to those specific access requests.
Yes, true. So in Vazu also it happens that so certain things with Vazu agents, as I'm familiar with, are that you can set up the local firewalls on that systems and the local ports that you know that okay, this Vazu service runs on this particular TCP port and this is the process name for it, and all other systems are being blocked basically from usages or sending data outwards, or some kind of security can be set in place.